My name is Elizabeth Montgomery, and I still remember that day as clearly as if it were carved into my mind. The morning sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of our red brick house in Charleston, South Carolina, a house that stood tall and proud, but carried the weight of too many secrets, too many unspoken words. The walls had heard every argument, every disappointed sigh, every attempt at pretending that we were a perfect family. It was the day my brother Nathan Montgomery was to be married, a day my parents had waited for with joy, and I had dreaded with quiet certainty. Our home was alive that morning with the sounds of excitement, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the echo of heels on the wooden floors, my mother's laughter rising above the rustle of fabric and perfume. I sat in my room, clutching a worn-out book that I wasn't even reading, trying to calm the heaviness in my chest. From my window I could see the car Nathan had rented, a shiny black sedan polished until it gleamed in the sun. It looked like something from another world, perfect and untouchable, just like the image of the life he thought he was about to begin. But I knew better. I had seen Clara Hensley, the woman he was marrying, for who she really was. I had known her before Nathan met her. We had attended a summer writing course together in Savannah, Georgia, 3 years earlier. Back then she had been charming and lively, always surrounded by admirers. She had a smile that could win over anyone. But I had watched her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes that never softened even when she laughed. Clara didn't love people. She used them. She spoke about men as if they were investments, measuring their worth in how much they could offer, how many doors they could open for her. When she met Nathan, I was stunned. My brother, kind-hearted but naive, was smitten within weeks. He believed in every word she said, every tear she faked, every promise she whispered. When I told him that Clara wasn't who she pretended to be, he grew angry. He told me I was jealous that I couldn't stand to see him happy. I tried to explain, to remind him of the stories she used to tell me about the rich men she dated for their money, but he wouldn't listen. That morning, while my parents prepared to leave for the ceremony, I tried once more. I found Nathan in his room, standing before the mirror, straightening his tie. His reflection looked tired, nervous even, but he forced a smile when he saw me. "What is it, Elizabeth?" he asked, as though I were a child interrupting his important business. I took a deep breath. "Nathan, please, listen to me. You don't know Clara like I do. She's not right for you. She hurt you. Before I could finish, he turned sharply. "Stop it," he said, his voice low and sharp. "You're always saying something negative. Always trying to ruin things. I'm tired of it. You're an embarrassment to this family." His words cut deeper than I expected. Embarrassment. That's what I was to them. A girl who spoke too honestly, who didn't smile when she was supposed to, who noticed the cracks in people that everyone else chose to ignore. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, he grabbed my wrist and pushed me backward into his room. I stumbled and caught myself on the bed. He walked out and locked the door behind me. At first, I thought it was a joke. But when I heard the click of the lock and the heavy footsteps fading away, I realized it wasn't. I ran to the door, pounded it with my fists, shouting his name, my mother's name, anyone's. No one answered. From the small window, I saw my parents walking to the car. My mother's hat gleaming in the sun, my father carrying his suit jacket neatly folded over his arm. They looked so peaceful, so sure of themselves, as if they were leaving behind a problem rather than a person. The sound of the car engine starting filled the air, and I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the door. My heart was racing. They were really leaving me there, locked in his room, because they believed I didn't deserve to be part of his happiness. I could hear the echo of my father's words from the night before. "Your brother is always right, Elizabeth. You need to learn your place." The silence that followed was unbearable. I sat on Nathan's bed, my fingers tracing the neatly folded clothes he hadn't taken, the faint smell of cologne in the air. I thought of Clara in her white gown, smiling that perfect smile, fooling everyone. I thought of Nathan's face when he realized too late who she truly was. Hours passed. The sunlight shifted from golden morning to pale afternoon. I could hear the occasional creak of the house, the whisper of the wind outside. There was no food, only a glass of water on the bedside table. My stomach growled, but my heart ached far more than my body. To distract myself, I looked around the room. At the trophies Nathan had won in high school, the framed photo of us as children standing by the harbor, both of us smiling at the camera. Back then, he had promised to protect me from everything. I wondered how that promise had turned into a locked door and silence. As evening fell, the house grew cold. I curled up on the bed, staring at the faint pattern of the ceiling, thinking about how quickly people decide who is right and who is wrong. I wanted to believe that my parents would come home and realize what they had done, that they would open the door and apologize. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. They had chosen to believe the story that made them feel comfortable, the story where I was the jealous sister and Nathan the devoted son. When the first car lights flashed across the window late that night, I sat up. They were home. I waited for footsteps, for the rattle of the lock, for someone to call my name. Instead, there was only silence and the faint murmur of voices downstairs, laughter, even. I realized they had returned from the wedding, tired but content, unaware or uncaring that I had spent the entire day locked away. I lay back on the bed, tears rolling silently into my hair. Somewhere in Charleston, my brother was probably dancing, surrounded by music and people who thought his new wife was perfect. And I was here, a ghost in my own home, forgotten and dismissed. Yet even as I cried, a small burning certainty grew inside me. One day they would see. One day, the truth would come for them, just as it comes for everyone. And when that day arrived, I would no longer need to speak. The truth would do it for me. When I woke up the next morning, the house was filled with a silence that felt heavier than the air itself. My head throbbed from the restless night I'd spent curled on Nathan's bed, listening for the sound of footsteps that never came. The faint golden light of dawn spilled through the window, painting the wooden floor in long streaks of pale warmth. For a moment I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing, that the locked door, the wedding, the betrayal, had all been a nightmare born of my fears. But when I glanced at the door and saw the faint outline of the keyhole, the memory returned like a bruise pressed too soon. Then, suddenly, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, tires crunching against gravel. A door slamming shut. My heart leapt. I stood up, brushing wrinkles from my dress, unsure if I should feel angry or relieved. Moments later, the front door opened, followed by hurried footsteps, voices low and tense. There was no laughter this time, no happy chatter. Just murmurs. The key turned in the lock. The door creaked open, and I found myself face to face with my mother. She still wore the pale blue dress she had worn to the ceremony, but it looked wilted now, creased, stained faintly near the hem, as though she had brushed against something dirty. Her lipstick had faded, and her curls had fallen loose around her face. My father stood behind her, looking worn, his tie loosened, his expression distant. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mother's voice broke the silence, trembling like a candle flame in a draught. "Elizabeth," she whispered, her eyes not meeting mine. "You were right." The words hit me like cold water. I didn't know what to say, didn't know whether to feel vindicated or sick. I waited, staring at them, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I asked, "What happened?" My father cleared his throat and looked away, but it was my mother who answered, her words spilling out quickly, as if speaking too slowly might make them real. "It was awful. Clara, she made a scene at the reception. People were whispering before dinner was even served. Your brother was so proud, introducing her to everyone, showing her off like she was some prize. And then," she paused, swallowing hard. "She disappeared halfway through the evening. We found her out on the terrace, laughing with another man. A businessman from New Orleans, I think." Nathan confronted her. She didn't even deny it. I pressed a hand to my mouth. For a brief, guilty second, I almost wanted to smile. Not because I took joy in my brother's pain, but because the truth, the one I had screamed and cried for them to see, had finally forced its way into the light. My father stepped forward, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "She humiliated him, Elizabeth. Right there, in front of everyone. Told him he wasn't worth her time. That she had married him because she liked the look of his house, not the man inside it. We left before the dinner even ended. I tried to picture it. Nathan standing there in his black suit, his pride shattered, his world collapsing. Despite everything he had done, I felt a deep ache in my chest. Where is he now?" I asked softly.
He stayed behind, my mother said, looking down at the floor.
He wanted to speak to her alone. The silence that followed was thick and uneasy. I could feel the weight of guilt settling into the room, pressing against us like invisible fog. My mother sat down at the edge of the bed and put her hands over her face. My father stood near the window, pretending to study the street, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. I wanted to scream, to ask them why they hadn't listened, why they had locked me away like a criminal when all I had tried to do was protect Nathan. But the anger wouldn't come. Instead, I felt hollow, drained. Sometimes being right isn't a victory. It's just another kind of loneliness. Later that afternoon, Nathan returned. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, slow, dragging, heavy with defeat. When he entered the house, he looked nothing like the confident groom who had left the day before. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his face pale and drawn. His eyes, those kind, bright eyes that used to look out for me when we were children, were filled with something I couldn't name. He walked past me without a word, heading straight upstairs. My mother tried to follow, but my father stopped her. "Let him be," he said quietly. "He needs time." I watched Nathan disappear down the hallway and close his door. The sound of the lock sliding into place echoed faintly, a cruel reminder of what he had done to me just the day before. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Every creak in the wood, every gust of wind through the trees, seemed to whisper reminders of what had happened. Around midnight, I got up and walked down the hallway, stopping outside Nathan's door. I thought about knocking, but didn't. Instead, I stood there for a long moment, listening to the faint sound of him breathing on the other side. I almost said his name, but the words stayed caught in my throat. The next morning he came to the kitchen while I was making coffee. He looked tired, unshaven, and years older. For the first time in days, our eyes met. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, he said quietly, "I don't know why you didn't just hit me over the head with a frying pan to make me see." I blinked, not sure how to respond. He gave a small, broken laugh. "You were right about her." Every single word. I wanted to tell him that being right didn't matter, that what hurt more was how easily he'd chosen to believe the worst about me. But when I saw the cracks in his voice, I couldn't bring myself to say it. Instead, I poured him a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. "You should rest," I said softly. "It's over now." He took the cup, nodding faintly. "Yeah," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. In the days that followed, Nathan barely left his room. My parents went about their routines as if nothing had happened, but the air in the house had changed. It was heavier, quieter, as though even the walls knew we were all pretending. I caught my father staring at Nathan sometimes, worry in his eyes, but he said nothing. Pride, once again, sealed his lips. As for me, I tried to find peace in small things, long walks along the harbor, the sound of waves against the shore, the feeling of wind tugging at my hair. I watched the world continue as if our little tragedy hadn't happened at all. One evening, as the sun set over Charleston, I realized something that stayed with me long after that week ended. Silence can protect people from shame, but it also traps them inside it. My family's silence wasn't peace, it was punishment. We were all locked in different rooms, pretending we didn't hear one another crying. The weeks that followed were the strangest I had ever lived through. It felt as though time had slowed down, like the house itself was holding its breath. Nathan rarely came out of his room. When he did, he moved like a ghost, quiet and detached, avoiding my eyes as though he couldn't bear to see the truth reflected there. My parents tried to act as if everything was normal, but their conversations had become stilted, and the television played endlessly in the background, filling the silence they didn't know how to break. I knew something was still unraveling, something beyond what they had told me that morning after the wedding. The whispers from the neighbors began within days. Charleston was a charming city, but gossip traveled through its streets faster than the wind that swept in from the harbor. I heard it first while buying groceries downtown, two women standing near the fruit stand, speaking in hushed tones. "Did you hear about Nathan Montgomery?" one said, leaning closer. "That girl of his, Clara. She's already gone back to Nashville. Took his car, too," the other gasped. "No." "Oh, yes. And not just that. Word is she drained his savings. Thousands of dollars." Poor man didn't even see it coming. Their words felt like sharp stones in my chest. I walked away before they could see me, before the tears could rise. I didn't need to hear more. I already knew it was true. When I got home, Nathan was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. His hair was messy, his face unshaven, and his once proud posture was gone. In front of him sat a stack of envelopes, bills, receipts, and bank statements. The sight of them made my stomach twist. She took everything, didn't she? I asked softly. He didn't look up. His voice was flat. Almost $45,000 gone, just like that. I sat across from him, trying to think of something to say, but there were no words that could make that kind of betrayal easier. He finally lifted his eyes to mine. She told me she wanted a new apartment in Nashville. Said she needed space while she worked on her art. I thought I was helping her. I remembered the way Clara used to talk about money, how casually she treated it, how quickly she could make a man feel like spending it on her was a privilege. I had seen her charm destroy men who were twice as experienced as Nathan. He had never stood a chance. She never loved me, Nathan said after a moment, almost to himself. She loved the dinners, the attention, the life I built for her. But not me. His voice cracked, and I felt my heart ache for him, despite everything. For all his pride, for all the ways he'd hurt me, he was still my brother. And now, stripped of the illusion that had once made him feel powerful, he looked like the boy I had grown up with, lost, fragile, human. In the following days, I watched him crumble piece by piece. He barely ate, barely slept. He spent hours at his desk, calling lawyers and the bank, trying to salvage what he could. But Clara had been clever. She'd moved the money through multiple accounts, some in her name, some under fake business titles. Even with legal help, most of it was unrecoverable. When the divorce papers arrived in the mail, Nathan stared at the envelope for hours before opening it. I stood in the doorway as he read through the pages, his hands trembling.
He didn't cry. Nathan never cried, but I could see the pain in the way he folded the paper so carefully.
As though trying not to tear it, a week later Clara called. I was in the living room when the phone rang. Nathan answered it, and though I couldn't hear her words, I heard his. "Why?" he asked, voice breaking for the first time. "Why did you do it?" There was a pause, then he laughed bitterly. "You knew what you were doing from the start. You knew exactly how to play me." Another silence. Then he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear, "You knew what you were when you married me." He hung up the phone without another word. That night he packed a small suitcase and drove away. He said he needed space, that he was going to New Orleans to clear his head. My parents didn't try to stop him. My mother simply nodded, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. My father offered him a few $100s in cash, but Nathan pushed it away. "I've lost enough money already," he said. He was gone for 3 weeks. During that time, the house felt emptier than ever. My parents and I spoke only when necessary, their guilt filling every silence between us. I spent most of my days walking through the city, thinking about how easily life could twist itself into something unrecognizable. When Nathan finally returned, he looked changed, thinner, quieter, older. He had grown a short beard, and his eyes no longer carried the same spark. He didn't bring any souvenirs, didn't talk about where he'd stayed or who he'd seen. He simply walked into the house, dropped his bag by the door, and said, "I'm home." Over the next few days, we fell into a fragile rhythm. He helped my father fix the old fence, sat with my mother during dinner, and even joined me once on a walk by the harbor. But there was something different about him now, a kind of stillness that hadn't been there before. One evening, just before sunset, he came to my room. I was sitting by the window reading, when he knocked lightly and stepped inside. He looked uncertain, holding a mug of coffee in one hand. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. I set the book down, surprised. For what? For everything, for locking you in, for not believing you. For making you feel small when you were the only one trying to protect me. His eyes glistened as he spoke. "You tried to tell me, Liz, you tried." It was the first time in years he had called me by that name. I smiled faintly, my throat tight. "You didn't want to hear it then," I said softly. He nodded. "No, I wanted the lie more than the truth." He sat beside me, and for a while we just watched the sun dip behind the trees. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold, the kind of beauty that hurt to look at because it reminded you of everything you'd lost. "I'm going to make things right," Nathan said finally. "Not with her, not with money, but with myself." I believed him. For the first time since that terrible day, I saw the faintest spark of the brother I once knew. The one who used to make me laugh until my sides hurt, who promised to always look out for me. Maybe we had both fallen, but somehow in the wreckage we had found our way back to each other. That night, when I went to bed, I realized that sometimes a fall isn't just about losing everything. Sometimes it's what brings you back to what matters, the truth, forgiveness, and the quiet bond of family that even betrayal can't fully destroy. Time has a strange way of smoothing out even the sharpest edges of memory. Years passed, though at first I wasn't sure how. The seasons changed, the world moved on, and slowly so did we. Nathan left Charleston a few months after that night when he apologized. He said he needed to rebuild his life somewhere new, somewhere that didn't echo with Clara's name or our family's disappointment. So he moved to Boston, Massachusetts, a city of gray skies and opportunity where he could start fresh. He found a small apartment near Beacon Hill, modest but warm, with creaky wooden floors and a window that looked out over the street below. He started working for an insurance firm, saving what little money he could. Sometimes he called me late at night when the loneliness became too loud. He would tell me about the snow, how it softened the city, how it made everything look clean again. "It's strange," he said once. "I used to think money was the only thing that made life feel full. But now, I think peace might be richer." Back in Charleston, I decided to do something I had long put off. I went back to college. I enrolled in the University of Charleston, studying psychology, though at first I didn't tell anyone why. Deep down, I wanted to understand people. I wanted to know what made them love the wrong ones, hurt the ones they shouldn't, and believe lies even when the truth stood screaming at the door. Perhaps I wanted to understand my family. Perhaps I wanted to understand myself. The house felt different without Nathan's presence. My parents, now quieter, seemed to live in a state of quiet penance. My mother filled her days with gardening and church events, while my father spent long evenings on the porch, staring into the distance as though searching for the son he'd once been so proud of. We never spoke openly about what had happened. But every so often I caught my mother looking at me with a kind of guilt that didn't need words. And though I could never forget how they locked me away that day, I realized forgiveness wasn't about pretending it hadn't happened. It was about no longer letting it control me. Over time, my life became my own again. I rented a small apartment near King Street, where the sound of jazz from the local bars would drift through the windows at night. I worked at a bookstore to pay my tuition and found comfort in the rhythm of normal days: coffee in the morning, lectures in the afternoon, and quiet study at night. Still, every so often I would think of that locked room, of the girl I had been frightened, misunderstood, but stronger than anyone realized. 3 years passed before Nathan came home again. It was Thanksgiving, and Charleston was alive with the soft chill of late November. The trees along the streets were dressed in fading gold, and the smell of roasted turkey drifted from every house. When he walked through our front door, my mother gasped softly, covering her mouth with trembling hands. My father stood up, uncertain whether to hug him or apologize first. Nathan smiled a little awkwardly and said, "It's good to be home." He looked different, not just older, but calmer, as though he had finally stopped running from himself. His hair was shorter, his face a little leaner, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. After dinner, when everyone had gone to the living room, he asked if he could speak to me privately. We went out onto the porch. The evening was cool, and the air smelled of pine and rain. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small white envelope. "What's this?" I asked.
He smiled faintly. "Just
"Something I owe you." I opened it, expecting a letter. Inside was a check, $10,000, written neatly in his careful handwriting. "Nathan, what?" "It's for everything I took from you," he interrupted softly. "For the trust I broke, for the things I said, for the days you spent locked in that room because of me. I can't erase it, Liz, but I can try to make up for it." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the check, the ink glinting under the porch light. $10,000, not a fortune but more than money. It was a symbol. A confession, a peace offering. I shook my head slowly. "You don't have to do this," I do, he said firmly. Because I need to know that I've given something back. That I've at least tried to repair what I broke. Tears filled my eyes, but I smiled through them. Then I'll keep it, I whispered. But I won't cash it, he frowned slightly, confused. I laughed softly. I'll frame it. A reminder that sometimes the things we lose aren't as important as what we find after. Nathan chuckled, his shoulders relaxing. That sounds like something a psychologist would say. Maybe, I replied, smiling. Or maybe it's just something a sister would. We stood there for a while, watching the quiet neighborhood, the glow of porch lights flickering across the street. I thought about all the things we had survived, betrayal, shame, silence, and how somehow it had led us here. Not perfect, not unscarred, but whole in a new way. That night, after he went to bed, I did exactly what I said I would. I found an old wooden frame, placed the check inside it, and hung it above my desk. Every time I looked at it, I didn't see money. I saw forgiveness, redemption, and a love that had been battered but never destroyed. Months later, Nathan called to tell me he'd been promoted. He was managing his own department now and had even begun volunteering at a youth program in Boston. Helping them avoid the mistakes I made, he said with a soft laugh. I could hear the pride in his voice, not the arrogant kind he used to have, but the quiet, earned kind. It made my heart swell. As for me, I finished my degree and began working as a counselor at a small clinic in Charleston. Every time someone came to me broken by someone else's choices, I thought of Nathan, of Clara, of that locked door, and I knew how to listen without judgment. I knew that sometimes people don't need advice. They need someone to believe that their story still has a way out. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat by my window, watching the sun set over the harbor. The water shimmered like glass, and I thought about how far we had come. The door that had once imprisoned me had become the door I had finally learned to walk through, the one that led me to strength, compassion, and freedom. Time doesn't erase what happened, but it transforms it. Pain becomes understanding, regret becomes wisdom. And love, real love, finds its way back through the cracks, like sunlight slipping under a door once locked shut. I looked up at the framed check on my wall and smiled. I didn't need to cash it. I had already been paid, in peace, in forgiveness, and in the quiet joy of knowing that the girl who was once locked away had finally set herself free.